Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you today?
I'm well, Rafael, and it's already tomorrow here, actually. I'm in Australia.
Yes, you're an incredible Australian author. You've had your books, wow, in over 48 languages, right? Or 48 countries. Tell me about the 48 or probably 60 by now, because they're so incredibly meaningful, is what I'm going to say, because I've been reading this book and wow, so impactful, meaningful. It makes us really reflect back on why we're even here. And I love that. So thank you for sharing that book with me. And we're going to get into all of your books and even what you're doing now. But Andrew, I want to get to know you a little bit, my friend. You have such an incredible story of who you are and how you became who you are. And I always believe that a lot of our current existence has to deal with our background, where we came from. So where were you born and who influenced you before the age of 10 even?
Well, I was born in a little town called Victor Harbor in South Australia, which is really a long way from anywhere. I mean, Australia is a long way from anywhere, but South
Mm,
Australia is not part of the happening, it's not Sydney or Melbourne. And I was out in the country in South Australia. I was blessed with loving parents, and
mm,
my father was a fun guy. He was an artist and a creative guy. He was an inventor. He was a farmer. He was a real estate developer, and so we were encouraged to explore whatever it was that we were fascinated with and interested with. So even as a 5 or 6 year old, I was drawing a lot and playing Australian rules football, which will be foreign to many of you. And
mm,
interestingly, because I write books and I illustrate my books, my mother was very interested in language and was always correcting my grammar. And
mm.
my dad was uh, was a professional artist, amongst other things. So I was very lucky that I grew up with parents that cared and
Mm,
grew up with parents that encouraged me to do creative things, not forced me, but so, and I had an older brother and an older sister who took care of me. And so those were my primary influences before the age of 10. Um, and so I
wow.
was the little guy. Um, the perhaps the more challenging thing about my life is I was very small.
Mm,
Um, when I was in first year high school, I was the smallest kid in the school,
mm,
and I remember going home and saying to my mother, "I'm the smallest kid in school. I hate it. They're always making fun of me. They say your school bag is bigger than you." And
mm,
she said, "Well, just wait a year. And in a year's time, there'll be another 100 kids in the school. There's bound to be someone smaller than you are." So I waited a year, and another 100 kids arrived in a year's time, and I was still the smallest kid in the whole school. I went home and I said to my mum, "I'm the smallest kid in the school still." And she
mm.
said, wait another year. So I waited another year. And now I'm in third year high school, and another 100 kids come to the school, and I am still the smallest kid in the whole school. I said to my mother, I hate this. She needed a different strategy. My poor mother, what's she going to say? She said,
Mm,
in life, there are things you can change and there are things you can't. So you accept what you can't change, and all the other things like, you know, how hard you work or your friends or, you know, how you behave, you change what you can. And
mm.
that was the beginning of an insight into, you know, perhaps some of what my books have been about. But I must say, Raphael, I didn't fully get the message, um, because even when I was in my 20s, I had a realization that my attitude was not as good as it could have been. And
Mm.
and that's what led to my first being happy. We can get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that your mom gave you something to look forward to, right? But except after the third year, she said, "Wait, I got to figure this out. I got to give him a different idea." And I think what she brought to your attention was brilliant because so right. And we try to change
Yeah.
things. We can't change the weather. We can't change, how tall we are, or some people will change their face through plastic surgery, but they're still the same person. There's, they might have done the physicality part of it, but inside they're still the same person. We got to change from the inside out so that
Yeah.
you, through your books, through your understanding and your studies, if you will, you've gotten so big. You're no longer the little guy, right?
Too.
When did you? I love the fact that you have illustrated, and I want to get into that because I love to draw. Your illustrations are phenomenal. What kind of? You said your dad was a professional artist. What kind of art did he do? Was it caricatures? Was it realistic? Was it? What was it?
Okay, so my father was a landscape painter, so he would go into the centre of Australia and he would paint the rugged outback and he would
Mm,
paint the gum trees, the eucalyptus trees, and the Great Murray River, which used to flow out, still does, about 10 miles from my home. Um, but my fascination was drawing people and cartoons, and I would draw cartoons of my teachers on the chalkboard and so on, and caricatures, and so long before I was ever thinking about writing a book, um, I began studying classical drawing, and so I became a portrait artist, and I studied human anatomy and like drawing like the old masters, and in that
mm,
tradition, um, and um, and I was making my living as an artist and as a private art teacher before, when I was about 25, I made this shocking discovery. I discovered that the happiest people I knew had bigger problems than me.
mm,
And that was a massive surprise. You see, I thought that I was going to get happier when my life got easier. And then I saw these people around me that were recovering from cancer, or people who had lost their jobs or gone broke or lost loved ones way too soon. And they seemed to be dealing with their challenges better than I was. And suddenly I had no excuse. And this opened me up to a whole new idea that it's not about what happens to you, but it's about how you think about what happens to you. And suddenly I wanted to learn everything I could about how happy people think and the subconscious mind. And um, so that took me off on a journey of reading over 200 books on attitude and how our mind works, and successful people and courageous people. And that led to my first book being Happy, which was the book that I wished I'd had.
Mm. You say the book you wished you had, but you know that that book was in you.
Um, well, well, very often we need to be reminded about things that we
Mm.
already know, or we need to get serious. Well, sometimes we need to be on our knees before we recognize that complaining doesn't work, or blaming other people
Mm.
doesn't work, or um, giving up doesn't work, or so it was at age 25 that I took a look at my life, and I realized that even though I had a very fortuitous beginning with caring parents, and they weren't rich, but we always had enough.
Mm.
Um, I realized that I wasn't doing as well as I thought I was going to. You know, I thought, how am I doing with romance? Nah, not very well. In the bank? No, not very well.
Mm.
What about, day-to-day happiness? No, not enough.
Mm.
And so there was a day for me, Raphael. It was the 19th of October, 1983. And I said to myself, I'm going to see my life differently from today. I'm going to
Wow.
embrace opportunities. I'm going to be more grateful, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to change the trajectory of my life by how I see it, and by putting everything I have into everything I do.
Mm.
I developed this personal philosophy, which was because I wasn't being courageous enough. So my new personal philosophy was, if in doubt, do it. Not that I should go out and do dangerous things,
Right,
but
right.
that I should take risks that might have me. If someone invited me to a seminar or to a party, or someone suggested something, or why not read this book? If I had an idea, maybe I can go on a cruise, and I can draw portraits on the cruise and get a free cruise. And I did that,
Mm.
and
Mm.
I started just doing anything I could to inject more excitement, more people, more everything into my life. And here's what I discovered, because it's something that we can all discover, is that life gets better when you get better. And when I
Mhm.
began putting more in, I was suddenly getting more out.
Right.
And so um, we don't have to wait for anything or anybody to come along. We choose. Uh,
We're the
we've all
driver
had
of our
to
destiny, right?
have. We've all seen like a 2-year-old, and he's playing on the furniture at home, and he falls on his head. And the first thing he does is he looks around to see who's watching. And based on the audience, he decides, am I going to laugh or cry? And
Mhm.
we think that's cute, but we sometimes forget that we're exactly the same. We're driving on the freeway and someone cuts us off, and we decide in that split second, am I going to let this worry me? Am I going to get angry? Or will I say to myself, maybe they're having a tough day?
Mm.
So we're always every moment and every day we're choosing, am I going to be happy or not?
Yeah.
And yeah, and that decision to be happier, to look on the bright side, to find things that we're grateful for, underpins a better life for all of us.
It sure does. I mean, I love the fact that even when you talk about the child falling, right? And it is so funny when you say that because I have seen it myself. And they're looking like, oh, the right people are here, let me cry. Or the other right people are here, let me laugh. Maybe because we
Yes.
started laughing.
Yeah.
But it's so incredible that we can make a choice, even at 2 years old, on how we're going to conduct what happened to us and get the most out of it, right? But and you're right, it could be a 38-year-old or a 48-year-old, and they react differently based on what the outside is bringing in instead of acting from their heart. Because maybe, and I just recently spoke with somebody who said to me, I have road rage all the time. I said, oh, God bless you. I said, it's not worth it. I said, that brings anxiety, that brings headaches, that brings y- road rage. You can die, you can kill somebody. I said, you know what I do? They're like, what do you do? I said, I bless anybody who cuts me off. I said, God bless you. I hope you make it home safe. I said, you're obviously more important than I am, so please go ahead of me. So I have that way of thinking of it, and they're like, "Oh, I should try that." I said, "You most definitely should because I like you as a person. I don't want to hear that you died in a car accident because you had road rage." But we need to take the step back to understand that no matter what, we can't change what life is going to throw our way. It's how we react to it, right? That's what you've been
Yes.
telling us. Being happy
Yeah.
is about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And a key thing is acceptance. We say, where does happiness begin? I mean, if you're going through tough times, and many people, when something happens that they hate, like they lose their job or they get dumped by their fiance or they break their leg, um, they continue to say things like, "This shouldn't have happened," as
Mm,
if you don't accept it, then you don't need to deal with it. And of course, the reverse is true, that the moment you accept something that you don't like, then you can move on. And so acceptance is power. And
mm,
while we continue to say, this is unfair, this shouldn't have happened, we're stuck. And one of the things that I talk about in bouncing back is that um, it's the it's the things that we least want to go through that turn us into the kinds of people that we really want to become. There's a cartoon in Bouncing Back, and there's a guy is climbing a mountain, and he's sweating, and he looks like he doesn't want to be there. Even his dog is sweating. And the caption of the cartoon is, "What you thought was breaking you is probably making you." And the
mm.
truth is that no one is born extraordinary. We become extraordinary by facing challenges that we didn't choose. And so when we come back to this idea of acceptance is power, that we accept the things that we didn't want to have happen, we say, I wouldn't have chosen this. But I know that as I embrace the things that I didn't want to have happen, I'm becoming a more resilient and a more useful, and it's not easy, but and a more useful person.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, your
And
illustrations are phenomenal, right? If anybody can see this, right? Look at these illustrations. They're so uh, not only do they make us think, but they're happy ones. They're ones that make you go, "What was I even thinking? How could I even think this way?" Right? This one is, "I deserve special treatment. I want it all. I want it now." Right? And this one is
Mm.
entitlement. And then there's another one, "Worst day ever. If I survive this, I will be so grateful." Right? So there's so many just like this, quick reads. This is why your book is so powerful, because you don't it doesn't hurt to start from the first page, but any page you open has an incredible message, step by step. I mean, look at this, right? Step by step. Be careful on your next step, right? This one is a to-do list. Any page that you open your book, look, you even have Rocky Balboa in here, right? So um,
Yeah,
I'm
he's
not
a
the
story
richest,
of
smartest.
resilience.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not the richest, smartest, or most talented person in the world, but I succeed because I keep going and going and going. Sylvester Stallone. What an incredible uh, concept that you put in bouncing back, because our downfall is not our end all, right? It may be the beginning. It may be the beginning of something new, right?
We all get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? So,
Mhm.
what you've highlighted there, Raphael, is that we learn and we remember um, based on pictures, on images,
Mhm.
and many people are not even comfortable with books. They don't go into bookstores. So, I wanted to write books for people who hate self-help books. I wanted to write books for people who have maybe never ever finished a book. The
Mhm.
challenge is to at the same time write a book that will not insult somebody who's maybe a professor or a psychologist or a CEO. But my experience is that everybody enjoys simple language and everybody enjoys a cartoon with a message. My challenge was when I started sending out my manuscript of my first book, uh, self-help book, Being Happy, that people were saying, "Who puts cartoons in self-help books?" And it took me a lot of publishers to find a publisher. I finally found a publisher in Singapore
Mm.
whose biggest whose biggest selling book to that date was the Vanuatu. It's a little island in the Pacific. The Vanuatu Telephone Directory was their major publication.
Mm.
And they said, "We want more of your cartoons in this book, and we're going to take this around the world." And so I'd found my publisher that I could work with, and to this day, people write to me and they say, "We love the fact that you combine images with simple messages. We can bite into your book wherever we like, and yeah, it's so important to because everyone, almost everyone, will enjoy a magazine and thumb through it, and
Mhm.
it's visually, I mean, it's interesting and it's easier, it's accessible, and so many books are intimidating, scary. They're 400 pages of words. So
Mm.
for me, um, it's also an opportunity for me to maybe share some fun with a reader, but to create a cartoon that connects to the message is important. I'll give
Mhm.
you an example. Uh,
Yes.
gratitude is the foundation to happiness. We say, what is the difference between happy people and unhappy people? And I've created a cartoon to illustrate that. So it's a two-panel cartoon. And the first panel is a really happy guy, and he's eating one slice of cake. That's all he's got, and he's happy. He's got a big smile on his face. And the caption is, "Happy people focus on what they have." And the second panel of the cartoon is a guy with a whole huge cake, and one slice is missing, and he's looking at the missing slice and he's very miserable, and the caption to panel number 2 is um, unhappy people focus on what's missing. And
Mm.
people remember that. I remember when I first posted that cartoon on Facebook, and suddenly it had like 63,000 likes and 2 million
Wow.
views in just a few days. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to post it because I thought it's not actually funny, but a cartoon doesn't necessarily need to be funny if it's sharing something that is helpful.
A great message too. It's appreciate what you have, right? What you tell me about your dad, but you like drawing people, and then you also like drawing cartoons. So now you gave your cartoons. It wasn't cartoons like Bugs Bunny type of thing, right? It was more cartoons where it's a caricature of a person, right? So you were able to capture in all
Mm.
these cartoons that I'm looking at a person, right? Even though here it looks, this guy looks like a doctor. Here's somebody on a bicycle. Here's somebody going up on a roller coaster. But you keep capturing people, and you made it a cartoonish so that it doesn't become so serious, but yet it is. So, how did you go from drawing people to cartoons and saying, "Let me blend them"?
It, it's a beautiful thing that the essentials. If I'm to draw like a portrait of you, like Michelangelo or Da Vinci or any of the great John Singer Sargent would draw of you, then the essentials that go into a traditional kind of a portrait or even a figure study, you bring into a cartoon, but you just keep the most important parts. So
Mm,
every time I draw a cartoon, I'm drawing on my classical training. And so the way the head sits on the body, I mean, the neck isn't straight, the neck projects forward. And there's three major parts of the trunk of a body. There's the head, and there's the rib cage, and there's the pelvis. And it's how you align each of those three that gives gesture and gives um,
mm,
interest to what the figure is doing. So it's all part of the one thing. A cartoon or a classical drawing is all part of the same thing, and it's just a matter of, are you keeping the essentials and exaggerating them, or are you wanting to hold on to most everything and create a traditional sort of drawing?
mm. Very cool, very cool. What I understood that at 25, you started to understand the concept of what your mom had told you when you were in high school. But what was the catalyst that you said, "I'm writing this book, I'm being happy"? You found it for yourself. Why did you need to share it with others?
I think that is why almost every non-fiction author writes a book, because they've come across a problem. How can you build a boat better? How can
Mm,
you do better in job interviews? How can you be happier? Uh,
right.
I got I got so excited about some of these simple concepts that no one had ever explained to me. And what was shocking to me was that I saw myself as being so blessed by
Mm,
my family and my background, and I was still not doing very well at 25. And in fact, as I look back, because my life had been relatively easy, I mean, I'd been a short kid, but I mostly dealt with that. Um, you know, at school, they used to throw me over the fence and they used to lock me in cupboards and
Oh my
But,
goodness.
it
Kids
was
can be
never
so cruel,
that
right?
brutal. It would
Right, right.
Yeah, but I mean, they did it because they could, It wasn't
Mhm,
because they hated me. It was well, he's little, we can throw him over the fence. And so, for the most part, I knew that I had a fairly fortunate childhood, um, and yet at 25, I was really struggling to live my life to the full, and I wasn't achieving, and as I'd hoped that I might. And so, as I began to understand a little bit about, for example, the subconscious, that we create what the life that we think about, that what what we say, whether we're using language about like I will try, or whether we say I will do this,
mm,
that is so important. Once I began to understand about, complaining doesn't help. For example, we all know that uh, we talk about what we think about. If we think
mm,
about food, we talk about food. But the reverse is
mm,
true. If we talk about things, then we keep on thinking about things that worry us. And so the more that you complain, the more that you upset yourself. Um,
mm,
so many things that crystallized for me. And I thought, if I was to put this in a simple book with cartoons for average people, so what we're talking about, 1988, there were no books on happiness in
mm.
1988. There were no books, self-help books, probably still aren't, with cartoons in them. And the people that read self-help books, when I began writing self-help books, they were insurance office worker or mother, or your average student. And so I had this idea that if I could share the things that had begun to change my life, simple things. Again, we often don't need new information. We just need to be
Mm,
reminded about things that we already know.
right,
So
right.
that was my mission, to create a self-help book for everybody. I mean,
Mm.
it was a big goal, but after a slow start, being happy began to get some traction, and and um, and so now I think we've sold well over 3 million copies of that book.
That's incredible. So let's talk about resilience because you showed resilience in continuing to push to get that book published. You went to so many different publishers, and yet they kept saying no. We're not. You're not serious. You can't write. You got caricatures on this book. What's wrong with you? Right? But your resilience,
Yeah,
your persistence, your attitude showed that you needed to do it. Talk to us about resilience if you can. I know you can.
yeah. Well, now I might preempt that by saying that the toughest one. I wrote a book before Being Happy, which was a
Mm,
children's book, and that one was really tough because I'd heard, and so I got a list of the 60 biggest English-speaking publishers in the world, and I created 60 copies of that manuscript, and I sent that all over the world, 60 copies at once. I thought this is genius, rather than wait
mm,
to have one publisher say no and then I'll send out 60. Within a couple of weeks, I started getting rejections, in the mail. And so after 3 weeks, I had like 10 rejections, and then I had 15 and 31 and 45, and
mm,
then I had 56 and 57 and 58 and 59 and 60. and then 61. One publisher wrote to me twice and said, forget it. So my first book, I sent out 60 manuscripts and got 61 rejections. So
Interesting.
uh, so together with the 17 rejections from being happy, I think I had 77 rejections before I got a book published.
Mm,
But here's the thing: every time somebody says no, you're a step closer to somebody saying yes.
that's right.
I had something. I had something. I guess my first manuscript, I knew it could have been better, the children's book that got all those rejections. Being happy, I felt that it was, I believed that there was a market. I believed that there was a need for a simple book that gave people hope, that had cartoons in it, that was
Mm,
more accessible, that was a book with serious uh, help, guidance, but felt a bit more like a magazine.
mm,
I thought that that should work. So that's why I continued. But if we talk about uh, how we become more resilient, which I think is your question. So, firstly, we've talked about acceptance, understanding
mhm,
that the things that we don't like, as soon as we embrace them and say, I wouldn't have chosen this, but somehow I'm learning something, I'm becoming more valuable, more useful, more resilient by having some situations that I don't like. So, number one is acceptance. Number two is dealing with our problems one day at a time. And
mm,
you picked out that cartoon in Bouncing Back of that guy on a ledge. And if you if when life gets tough, you've got to deal with life as you would climb a mountain. And if you're climbing a mountain and you get stuck on a ledge, then suddenly, as you're stuck on that ledge, all of your concentration, all of your focus goes into dealing with that ledge and getting off that ledge. And inch by inch, you claw your way out. And you're not worrying about all the things you've got to do in the next month or even in the next week. All of
mm,
your focus goes into, let me deal with this moment right now. And when life gets difficult, that's what we do. All of our focus goes into this current issue that I have. If you're to worry about everything, if you're stuck on that ledge and you worry about everything that you need to do in the next year or everything that could go wrong in the next year, you'll go nuts.
yeah.
But you can deal with life 5 minutes at a time, one day at a time. And that is what
Mm,
effective people do. So that's number two tip for resilience, as in just deal with what is in front of you, live one day at a time. And the third thing that we notice that resilient people do is that they have a picture in their mind of a better life. You can get through almost anything if you have a picture in your mind of how your life is going to be when you get through this.
mm,
And everything starts as an idea. More confidence begins as an idea in your mind. More money in the bank begins as an idea in your mind. Being a better cage fighter begins as an idea in your mind. Um, being happier begins as an idea that
mm,
yes, I can do this, and we
mm,
become what we think about. So, a big part of being resilient is having a picture of where we're headed.
mhm. You made me think of Nelson Mandela being incarcerated for so long. How can he come out and forgive his captors or even invite the prison guards who said that they should kill him to dinner? How can somebody like that is because he envisioned a better tomorrow. And I love that we're
Yeah.
talking about this
Yes.
because we listen, most people who are incarcerated the way Nelson Mandela was could never come out and be happy at the end and do good for people. They would come out with resentment, they would come out with hatred. Meanwhile, he didn't show hatred, he showed love, which is huge, which is huge. And that's being happy is showing your heart, right?
Yes. Yes. And I love what he said, that if he allowed himself to be resentful, then he would continue to be in prison, and he may have well have stayed there. And
Mm,
what he had was a vision for a better South Africa, and that he was the man to lead South Africa to a better South Africa.
mm,
And he even invited, when he was inaugurated, he invited his jailer to attend his inauguration. I mean, just extraordinary. But it emphasizes, and, and I like that you brought up Nelson Mandela, because people like him can inspire us, and we can say to ourselves, if he can do that for people that um, had him uh, captured, locked up for 27 years, then I can forgive someone who forgets my birthday or cuts me off on the freeway. But we
yes.
don't forgive people for their benefit.
Mm,
We forgive people for our benefit. If you're my boss and you give me the sack, and I say I'm never going to forgive Raphael because he sacked me, then I'm the one that's up nights pacing the floor. I'm the
mhm.
one that's got the knot in my stomach. You're probably at the movies. Where do we get that if we don't forgive people, they suffer? I mean, it's nuts.
Mhm. It's interesting that we're also talking about forgiveness because forgiveness gives you freedom. I understand forgiveness very much, and sometimes what I talk about is forgiving somebody and not necessarily having to tell them. You can forgive somebody who died. You can forgive somebody who hurt you so bad that you don't want to be near them, but you can forgive them so you can move on and not worry about them.
Yes,
Right. So I love that you
yes.
brought that up because forgiveness is true freedom. And we don't hold on to it. We don't, like you said, don't pace the floor, don't have a knot in your stomach because that other person could be just as happy as a clam and they don't even think about you anyway. Right.
And there's one other idea I'd like to share here, and that is that uh, certainly forgiveness is not an easy thing. So we're not talking about what's easy. We're talking about what's
Mm,
possible. If it was
right.
easy, we wouldn't even need to talk about it on a podcast. I mean, because anyone can just go away and do it. But people say, well, how do you do it because it's so hard? One of the things that we can practice doing is forgiving the little things first. You don't have to forgive the person that your partner that walked away with half your fortune yet. But what you can do is you can forgive the person that cut you off on the freeway, as you say.
Mhm,
Start with the little stuff, and just start with the little exercises, and just gradually build up to the bigger things. And that's perfectly possible and makes a lot of sense. Start small.
mm,
Don't even bite off the big ones yet.
yeah. I love in your book how you honor your wife. That's so beautiful.
Let me, well, let me tell you about my wife. I I begin bouncing back talking about my wife, Julie.
Mm,
Julie became my publisher in 1995, and so Julie has published the last 10 of my books.
mm,
And Julie lost her mother when she was 10. At 8 years old, she was cooking for her brothers and sisters. At 8 years old, she was taking her mother to hospital. At 8 years old, she was helping to organize her family in Malaysia and doing things that
Mm,
8-year-olds shouldn't have to do. But she went on to do extraordinary things. She was Malaysia's first female advertising executive. She had a finishing school in Australia. I think Australia's first modelling and finishing school combined. She then, knowing nothing about publishing, became my publisher, and she said, "Andrew, we're going global." She's the reason that we're now in 49 languages. We just sold the
mm.
rights to one of my books to Azerbaijan this week.
Wow,
Um,
congratulations.
so if I was to, thank you. It's Julie's work. She is phenomenal. She is unstoppable. But if you were to ask Julie, what is it that turned you into this force of nature? She would say, I think it was losing my mother when I was 10 years old.
Mm,
The thing that I least wanted to happen, the strength and ultimately the confidence and the resilience to make so many things happen that she would never have had she not lost her mum when she was so young. But yes, just I mean, I could and I may write an entire book about my wife, Julie.
mm. Sounds beautiful. The fact that she bounced back, right? She didn't let losing her mom and taking care of her siblings a detriment to her. That's and lovely that you started the book with her to show that no matter what happens in your life, you can bounce back from it. Whether you lost someone, you lost a
Y-
job, a relationship,
Yeah,
whatever, um,
yeah.
that we can bounce back. It's very interesting
I think.
when go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that in that context, then we realize that most disasters are not total disasters. That even if we lose someone so precious,
Mm,
that that there are good things that come from what seem to be, the worst circumstances.
right.
In Julie's case, I mean, I never forget meeting a family whose house had just burned down, and I
Mm,
was a teenager at that stage, and they were the happiest family I'd ever met. And I thought, how come they're so happy that their house just burned down? But I think they were even more appreciative of each other, and they learned that even that doesn't stop us. But
mm,
even things like, maybe you're at the airport and your plane is meant to be leaving in 30 minutes, and suddenly you find out your flight is cancelled and you need to spend another 6 hours there before your next flight leaves. And so often we say, oh, this is terrible, this is a disaster. But what happens? You meet someone and they become a lifelong friend because you were stuck at the airport. I mean,
mm,
so often extraordinary, unexpected opportunities come from things that we thought were total disasters, and that is helpful if we can. So often, when things don't, and maybe okay, maybe we're not going to do it in the first 5 minutes. Be angry for 5 minutes if you have to, but then remind yourself and say, "Hey, how often have I seen unexpected opportunities and friendships and learning experiences come from things that I thought this is the worst thing?"
mm. I've had people tell me that there have been catastrophic things that happened, and because they didn't show up, something happened that prevented them from going to this event. They could have
Yeah,
lost their life. They could have
Yeah.
lost their life. Yet something, and they were mad about it. They were late, their train didn't come, whatever it is. And then an accident happened, but they were not involved in it because something held them back. And I said, because it wasn't your time, right? So that's one way to look at it. But also, things happen for a reason. I always say, there is no coincidence. I believe that no matter how you look at life, life has a way of guiding us, whether we like it or not.
That is my experience too, Raphael, and that leads us into something else that I find uh, is fascinating and maybe helpful for our listeners, and that is that many of the things that we try don't work as well as we hope they will. Maybe
Mm,
you create a video and you put it on YouTube and you think this is going to go viral, and
right.
in a week's time you've got 3 views, and you know that one is your mother, and you think, okay, and you create an ad and that doesn't work, and maybe you build a website, you think this is going to amaze everybody, and nobody goes there. You write a manuscript, you send it to publishers and they don't like it. You go on a first date and you're really hopeful that it's
Mm.
going to be wonderful, and it's kind of okay, but not what you'd hope. Many things that we try don't turn out
Excuse me.
as well as we hope they would. But here's the thing, if we keep putting in our best effort and every day we say, I do my best, I give my all because that is who I am, then one day, and it's usually when you least expect it,
Mm,
that someone comes along, you meet someone, you get an opportunity you never planned for, you never saw coming, you could not have created it, but something comes along, or you know, a potential husband comes along, or a business opportunity, or a great friend, or a sale, or something you could never have planned it. And it comes from the most unlikely place that you never expected. But the key is this, it came along because you were out there doing your best day
mm.
in, day out. And then when you least expect it, life rewards you.
Oh, yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. Andrew, I love what you have done with the lessons you've learned along the way. How did you actually meet Julie? Did you meet her first and then she became your publisher, or she was your publisher and that's how you started dating?
Okay, so it was probably about I met her in '86, and it was October '83 when I decided that I've got to change how I'm living, and I've got to embrace opportunities and be more courageous. And I was then, before I wrote books, I was doing weekend seminars that were talking about the value of goal setting and the power of the subconscious mind, and how we can actively create a better and a happier life. I was doing weekend seminars. So I was giving an introductory presentation at the Hilton Hotel in Adelaide in the ballroom, and in came this apparition, this one of the most beautiful, elegant, classy
I'm gonna get you to say that again because
presentation.
you cut. I'm gonna ask you to say who came in again because you cut out. By the way, so can you say it again?
Sure. So I'm giving a presentation at the Hilton Hotel talking about my weekend workshops, and in comes this apparition, this beautiful, elegant, classy lady that just took my attention. She listened to my introductory presentation. She did my weekend seminar, and I was totally captivated and couldn't concentrate on almost anyone else in the room except this lady. And we all went out to dinner uh, after the weekend seminar, and she was about to leave, and and so I made an excuse to talk to her, and she said, what do you do when you're not running these seminars? And I said, well, I'm a windsurfer, and she said, I live on a lake, and she said, just being polite, you could windsurf off my lawn, like, and I thought, I'm going to do this was my if in doubt, do it. And if ever there was a case of, someone in a different league, that was her. And I was a country kid, and she was sophisticated. She was running a finishing school at that stage. I mean,
Mm,
she was elegant and beautiful and worldly and making money, and I was struggling still.
mm.
But anyway, I decided this is my motto: if in doubt, do it. And the very next Sunday, I showed up at her place and I windsurfed off her lawn. And as she tells it, I never left. But you know,
That's awesome. That's incredible. Um, when you and you are working on a book now, and you told me you've been working on it for the last 6 months. Tell us a little bit about that book and why it's so important to you.
in 2001, I wrote a book called Being a Happy Teen, which was, I guess, a compilation of some of my other books, but dealing with teenage problems. Because we found that a lot of teenagers were reading my books, but they wanted a book that was just about their challenges and their
Mhm.
concerns. And so being a happy teen became very popular in many different languages and countries. That was 2001, but wow, such a lot has changed in the teenage landscape
Mm,
in the last 24 years. And we've got things like gaming and sexting and more bullying and online safety and all of those things.
right.
And and many of our teens are lost and they're lonely and they're comparing themselves and not liking themselves and losing direction. And so it's time to rewrite that teen book and deal with all of those issues that our teens are dealing with now. And
Right.
so I've rewritten, reorganized the whole book. Um, and I've just redrawn or drawn another 50 cartoons for Being a Happy Teen. And we're going to be launching that. I'm expecting in the middle of the year.
That's incredible. Thank you for doing that because you're right. The teens need something to to look at, to have the positivity that they need because there is so much negativity in the world. Like you said, texting, sexting, bullying, um, anxiety is being built up in these teens. So thank you for doing that. We
Yes.
are at the end of our show, my friend. It's incredible. Thank you for being here with me. I'd love to give everybody your website is going across. It's uh, andrewmatthews.com. Tell us what somebody can expect when they come to your website.
Sure, thank you. Well, I do a newsletter, and like my books, it is very simple and it's brief and it has a cartoon. So every 2 weeks, you can get my newsletter, a little bit of joy and brightness in your inbox. And if you become too happy, you can unsubscribe at any time. Um, and you can find out about my books. I've written 12 books. And
Mm.
so you can find out about being happy, bouncing back, follow your heart, happiness in hard times. All of my books are on Amazon, so you can find them in hard copy or in ebook. Bouncing Back, my new book, is in Audible format as well. If you like to listen to a book in an Australian accent, I've just finished recording and uploading that. Thank you. So I think it would be great if you want to join my newsletter and get a little bit of joy every 2 weeks. You can find out a little bit about what I do and get some perspective on what's been my journey and my series of books. And I mean, it's just been a joy to chat with you, Rafael. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, my friend. Everybody, do me a favor. Go to andrewmatthews.com. This guy is incredible. And why not subscribe to the newsletter? Right? Every 2 weeks, you're going to get a great newsletter with a great message and a great cartoon. It's a win-win, everybody. So do me a favor. Let's hang out with Andrew. Andrew, what a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Truly appreciate you. You are a gem. Everybody, make sure you share this show with somebody because somebody needs to hear the message that Andrew shared with us today. Maybe it's a teen, maybe it's your friend, maybe it's your loved one. Go for it. Share the show. Everybody, thank you. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. Andrew, hang on for a sec, okay? All right, everybody, take care.